Lord of Mysteries. My Identities echoes across time chapter 411 to 420. PFF'd. You don't need to remind me, I'm a hunter after all. Medici swirled his wine glass with a hint of disdain on his face. When it comes to acting, he's no match for you. When it comes to sensing and controlling emotions, the hunter pathway is undoubtedly one of the best among the 22 pathways, rivaled only by the demoness and visionary pathways. So, naturally, Medici could see through the true nature hidden behind Akas's gentle facade. In fact, it was precisely for this reason that Medici and Akas's had always been at odds. Medici truly disliked dealing with someone who, even when facing comrades, was all false emotions. Hearing this, Lynn felt slightly relieved but then suddenly said, "What do you mean he's no match for me in acting? When did I ever act in front of you?" Medici rolled his eyes, clearly unimpressed, as if he wanted to write on his face, "When didn't you act in front of me? Can that even be called acting? At most, it's just bluffing." Lynn said confidently. "Isn't bluffing worse than acting?" Ouroboros asked with confusion. PFF'd. Ha ha ha. You finally said something reasonable, you snake. Medici laughed unrestrainedly, his laughter as arrogant as it could be. No matter how much I bluff, it's still better than some people who are more stubborn than a bone. Lynn squinted his eyes, seemingly unbothered by the remark, but in the following game, fate, once again, favored Medici. Come on, this time it's the truth. Lynn smiled slyly at a certain angel of war and slowly said, "While I was asleep, were you worried about me?" Medici paused, then downed the wine in his glass in one go, wiping his mouth carelessly with his sleeve before replying in his usual mocking tone, "Don't be so narcissistic. But if you weren't worried about Lynn, Medici, why did you drink?" Ouroboros asked with genuine curiosity. "Yeah, why did you drink?" Ha ha ha. This time, it was Lynn's turn to laugh. On the other side, observing the lively scene at their table, Saucerier's gaze softened. Suddenly sensing something, he turned to the figure beside him and asked with some confusion, "Lord, why are you here?" "Just finished handling some matters, so I came to check on things." The ancient sun god replied calmly, also quietly watching the lively trio not far away. He then said, "I'm equally glad that Lynn has awakened." Saucerier was momentarily stunned. "I've already contacted Amonises. She'll be here in a few days to discuss our next steps against Ormir. When she arrives, you'll be responsible for receiving her." The ancient sun god suddenly shifted the topic, as if the previous statement was just a casual remark. He glanced at Saucerier, then added after some thought, "You can bring Lynn along. Amonises should also be happy about his awakening." Although Lynn and Amonises had only met a few times in this era, the two had always gotten along well, possibly due to the shared traits of being transmigrators. "Understood, I'll take care of it." Saucerier nodded quickly, already constructing a plan to welcome Amonises based on what he knew about her. Then, from the corner of his eye, he noticed that Leodoro had somehow joined Lynn and the others. They seemed to have exchanged a few words before Leodoro became part of the group. Soon after, Saucerier saw Lynn scanning the surroundings, locking onto his position with precision, and waving at him, "Saucerier. Saucerier. Come join us for a game. We need another player for Werewolf." He then glanced at the ancient sun god and hesitated for a moment before enthusiastically inviting, "Sun god, would you like to join us?" Saucerier hesitated, glancing at the ancient sun god beside him, only to see his body slightly nod in approval. "Go ahead, a little entertainment helps increase efficiency in future tasks." And so, the two of them walked towards Lynn. The banquet of the second epoch was lively and boisterous, while the mechanical angel of the fourth epoch was also awakening simultaneously. Thank goodness, it's only been 3 months, not 100 years. Getting almost traumatized by the century-long slumber in the second epoch, Lynn instinctively checked how long he had been asleep. Thankfully, while it wasn't as short as the 7 days in the fifth epoch, it was only 3 months. Although it delayed some matters, it was far from the drastic changes that occurred after his previous 100-year slumber. However, to prevent this from happening again, I'd better make preparations before any future sleep, Lynn muttered to himself. He then noticed Ouroboros sitting quietly on the ground, eyes closed in prayer. Behind him was a massive cross, but unlike in the fifth epic, there was no inverted figure hanging on it, only a figure sitting atop the cross, quietly reading a book. Lynn paused, his eyes widening slightly in surprise. He looked incredulously at the figure on the cross and uncertainly asked, "True Creator?" "It's me." The figure leapt down from the massive cross, landing steadily on the ground. His cloak fluttered, revealing a face that was 7 parts similar to Sasrir's and 3 parts similar to the ancient sun gods. But Lynn wasn't focused on the face. After all, it wasn't the first time he'd seen the face beneath the cloak. What truly caught Lynn's attention was that the true creator's eyes, once nearly overwhelmed by madness and negative emotions, leaving only a sliver of rationality, were now much clearer, almost like those of a normal sequence 0, with none of the usual maddening whispers. It's worth noting that the true creator of the fourth epic, while not as mad as in the fifth epic, still bore some madness. Could it be? Lynn immediately thought of something and asked, "Did the buff from my slumber affect you as well?" Yes, the true creator nodded, causing Lynn to reveal a regretful expression. Lynn seemed slightly disappointed. "If I had known, I would have slept a little longer." "There's no need for that. This is just a temporary clarity. I'd rather you wake up sooner." The true creator shook his head, appearing in good spirits. He even joked, "Thankfully, you didn't sleep for another 100 years like before, or I wouldn't have had a prince to wake up the sleeping beauty." "Shouldn't it be a princess?" Lynn retorted. He then fell silent, looking at the temporarily lucid true creator. After several seconds, he finally said, "I will help you regain complete clarity, so you can live like this forever. I look forward to that day." The true creator smiled, his expression warm as always. He reminded, "But don't push yourself too hard." End of chapter. Welcome to Fanfic Audiobook, your go-to place for immersive audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. Although it was unexpected, the fact that the true creator could regain clarity, even if only temporarily, was undoubtedly a good thing. It was something that pleasantly surprised Lynn. This development meant that Lynn's previous thoughts were correct. As long as the madness could be overcome, the true creator could return to a clear state, becoming the person Lynn once knew. In addition to this pleasant surprise, Lynn naturally learned from the true creator about the events that transpired during the 3 months he was in slumber. The first person to discover Lynn's condition was Bethel. Mr. Dorr, after realizing something was unusual about Lynn's state, immediately contacted Medici. The latter had seemingly just synchronized with memories from the second epic and was not surprised by Lynn's slumber. He simply took Lynn away with force, which explained why Lynn found himself lying under the true creator's cross when he woke up. During Lynn's slumber, the most significant event was undoubtedly the true creator, who, influenced by the buffs surrounding Lynn during his slumber, suppressed the madness and regained clarity. As the former vice-king of heaven, who nearly single-handedly built the ancient sun god church, the true creator almost immediately began to improve and develop the fledgling true creator church that Lynn had just set up. He was not unconcerned about Lynn's safety, but the memories from the past and his own judgment made the true creator firmly believe that Lynn's slumber was not a bad thing. Moreover, the true creator had no means to awaken Lynn. Given the situation, rather than sitting idly and waiting for Lynn to wake up, the true creator felt it was better to get some work done while he was still lucid. This way, when Lynn woke up, things would be easier for him. The true creator knew that Lynn did not particularly enjoy working. He was well aware that this child, whom he had mentored for several years, preferred to slack off rather than engage in work. So, the true creator decided to complete the work in advance, as it was also his responsibility. Once the former Dark Angel and current true creator got serious, his efficiency was extraordinary. After all, this was the man who once single-handedly managed the entire Divine Kingdom's operations. As a result, within just 3 months, the true creator had transformed the church from a fledgling organization into a fully structured one, only lacking specific clergy members to fill various departments. The only issue was that there weren't many talented followers among the true creator's believers. In 3 months, it was impossible to quickly produce a batch of clergy to fill the entire church. Otherwise, Lynn would have woken up to a perfectly established church of a true God. It's a pity that I didn't focus on cultivating followers when I was mad. Even though I've lowered the standards now, those who can meet the requirements are only enough to roughly support the church's framework. In the future, it will be up to you to slowly train and select suitable people to fill the various departments, the true creator said, both apologetically and helplessly. He hadn't expected that after so many years, even after merging with the Lord and becoming a true god, his followers were still so few and far between. It made the true creator momentarily feel like he was back in the second epoch. The problem was that his current state wasn't great. He had only temporarily regained clarity and would soon fall into madness again. The remaining tasks would have to be handled by Lynn. Otherwise, the true creator wouldn't mind running the entire church himself like he did in the past and gradually training others who could be of use. Unfortunately, he was now powerless to do so. No worries, this is already better than I expected. Lynn waved his hand with a subtle expression and said, "You've basically done the hardest part of the work. The rest is just about cultivating talent and recruiting followers. This is the work I'm familiar with." For the mid to low sequence Beyander clergy who would form the backbone of the church, Lynn could certainly select suitable individuals from the current followers of the true creator for training. However, cultivating high sequence followers wouldn't be possible in the short term. While there were some high-sequence individuals among the true creator's followers, they were far fewer compared to other true God churches, so more were needed. Lynn's strategy was simple. On the one hand, he would make long-term plans, regularly selecting outstanding and suitable talents from the true creator's followers for long-term training. Although not all of them could become high-sequence, over time, some would emerge. On the other hand, he would directly target the well-developed followers of other churches and recruit them. Their loyalty wasn't crucial. As long as they didn't betray during their service, that was enough. Most high-sequence Beyonders, especially those at the angel level, weren't necessarily loyal to the gods they followed. After all, not everyone was like Medici, whose loyalty made one question whether he was a natural-born mythological creature. Most angels followed a sequence 0 being merely for protection and sustenance. By the way, where is Medici? Where did he go? Lynn looked around curiously and asked. Medici is currently visiting the Zoroast family, the true creator responded, clearly not hiding anything from Lynn. Although the church is already structured, it lacks many components. Solomon agreed to assist us in establishing and developing the church, but he won't directly involve himself in many specific matters. Instead, he will let the angel families following him assist us. In other words, the Zoroast family had been ordered to help establish and develop the true creator church, and Medici had clearly gone to negotiate with Palace Zoroast about the specific investment for the church's development. Or more precisely, Medici had gone to ask for money, people, and resources. After all, establishing a large church from scratch, even with the framework already in place, wasn't a simple task. Both talent and resources were significant issues. Since Solomon had instructed the Zoroast family to assist in establishing the true creator church, it would be a waste not to take advantage of the opportunity. The Zoroast family. Isn't that the family of Old Man Pallas? Lynn's eyes lit up instantly, and he said excitedly, "How can I not be involved in such a big matter? And are we sure it's reliable to let Medici handle this alone?" He added, unable to resist a jab. Lynn certainly trusted Medici's intelligence. The mind of a top-level schemer was not to be underestimated. However, he really didn't trust Medici's mouth. The sharp tongue had long been ingrained in the War Angel's nature, making Lynn worry that Medici might start a fight with the other side due to his words while negotiating for resources. End of chapter. After all, as a family that has followed the Black Emperor Solomon since the First Solomon Empire and even has a sequence 1 member, the Zoroast family is not a soft persimmon to be easily bullied. Lynn was genuinely afraid that if Medici were too harsh while taking advantage, and if his words were too blunt, it might anger the other party, who might then directly complain to the Black Emperor Solomon. We can't let Medici go, but it's also not suitable to send Ouroboros. The true creator naturally understood why Lynn was complaining and felt a bit helpless when saying this. In this matter, he, as a sequence 0, naturally couldn't step in directly. But among those qualified to negotiate with Palace Zoroast, only Medici and Ouroboros fit the bill. The War Angel is a standard hunter, but at least his intelligence is sufficient. He understands what the church currently needs the most, and he knows how to negotiate with others. As for the Angel of Fate, let's just say that if it's something like compiling holy texts, organizing materials, or serving as an assistant in unchanging and straightforward work, Ouroboros is capable. But for negotiations, obtaining resources, or anything requiring flexible morals and quick thinking, sending Ouroboros would be a mistake. In the end, while the Black Emperor Solomon had arranged for the Zoroast family to assist the true creator, how much they could extract from the Zoroast family would depend on the capabilities of those in the true creator's camp. The Black Emperor Solomon naturally wouldn't command a loyal angelic family to bleed dry for the true creator's church. It wouldn't be appropriate, and Solomon also had to consider the Zoroast family's own wishes. Even in front of a Sequence 0, a family with a Sequence 1 member still has a voice, not to be easily squashed. Moreover, the Zoroast family has been a longtime follower of the Black Emperor Solomon, so it's impossible for Solomon to be so cold and heartless. Thus, how much the true creator's camp could extract from the Zoroast family would ultimately depend on the negotiations that are, in essence, investments or interest exchanges. The true creator's camp would first paint a big picture, then the Zoroast family would evaluate it and decide how much to invest. If the picture is appealing, the Zoroast family would surely invest heavily. If not, they might offer some help out of respect for Solomon, but it wouldn't be much. After considering the options, the true creator decided to let Medici handle the negotiations. Although his words could be harsh, he was still a hunter, well trained by Lynn, and might just secure a large investment. True, Ouroboros isn't suitable either. Lynn looked at Ouroboros, who was quietly sitting beside him, and gave him a confused look after hearing his words. Lynn couldn't help but nod. Sending Ouroboros to negotiate might just end with Palace Zoroast dismissing him casually. But since I'm already awake, I should go and have a look, negotiate with them personally. Lynn stroked his chin and decided. Negotiating. He was an expert in that field. Ever since he transmigrated into this world, he had lost count of how many times he had painted big pictures. Achoo. At the Zoroast family's residence, Palace Zoroast sneezed without warning. This puzzled him, as he hadn't been ill since advancing to a high sequence. Before he could think about it, his attention was drawn back to the words of the War Angel in front of him. This proposal is barely passable, but still. Medici held a piece of parchment, criticizing the proposal from top to bottom without stopping. He pointed out every flaw of the Zoroast family members temporarily assisting the true creator's church, and criticized the quantity and sources of spiritual materials and Beyonder characteristics they had provided. It wasn't that he dismissed the proposal entirely, but it was clear he intended to open the negotiations with an excessive demand. Pallas listened quietly to his criticisms, his brow twitching slightly. If it weren't inappropriate, he would have liked to splash the tea in his hand onto the other party. He could understand the criticism, but did it have to be so harsh? No wonder Beyonders of the Hunter pathway were either chasing others or being chased themselves. With a mouth like that, it's no surprise they were always in trouble. Pallas couldn't help but mentally complain, though he maintained a polite smile on his face, saying, I understand that Lord Medici is dissatisfied with the proposal, but I hope you can also sympathize with us. The Zoroast family is, after all, just an ordinary angel family, unlike the churches of the true gods. Our resources are limited. After a bout of self-deprecation, portraying the Zoroast family as small and weak, Pallas shifted his tone. Of course, I am personally very willing to support the true creator in establishing a church. Clearly, Pallas was planning to say something nice, then make some concessions to move the negotiations to the next stage. After all, negotiations are about compromise and mutual benefit. Just then, a chuckle was heard from outside the door. Since Mr. Pallas is so willing, why not take a nominal position in the true creator's church? You wouldn't really have to serve the true creator, just hold a title and help out occasionally. Upon hearing the unfamiliar voice, Pallas was naturally puzzled, but he noticed that Medici beside him seemed suddenly energized, clearly recognizing the newcomer. Of course, this was not surprising, given that the speaker was obviously a member of the true creator's camp. But when did the true creator gain such an angel? Pallas looked towards the young angel who had entered the room, falling silent as he studied the figure. After a few seconds, he suddenly realized something and asked tentatively, "Libert Abraham?" As a follower of the Black Emperor Solomon, Pallas had his own sources of information. Though he hadn't officially met Lynn, he had heard of the young man and knew the description of his appearance. "It seems my fame is greater than I thought," Lynn did not deny it. He smiled as he walked into the room, his gaze falling on the two angels inside. The younger brother, Medici, had nothing new to note. Only 3 months had passed since their last meeting, and he hadn't changed much. But the other angel was clearly the current head of the Zoroast family, the infamous marauder, Pallas Zoroast. Unlike the version of Pallas from the 5th epic, who could only parasitize Leonard's body and, despite possessing the characteristics and rank of a Sequence 1, couldn't fully wield his power, the current Pallas, although not dominant against Amon in battle, was not as miserable as he would be in the future. Even though he still looked like an old man, he carried an air of vitality. Come to think of it, of all the angels I know, only Pallas retains the appearance of an old man. Does he have some sort of old man fetish? Lynn mentally mocked him before speaking again. "Mr. Pallas, what do you think of my suggestion?" End of chapter. What does Mr. Pallas think of my recent suggestion? Upon hearing Lynn's words, Pallas Zoroast's expression remained unchanged, but his gaze became subtly nuanced. It's not surprising. After all, what Lynn had just proposed was indeed absurd. Even though the Black Emperor, Solomon, and the true creator were staunch allies, they were still two different Sequence 0 beings. Just as the Angel of War, Medici, couldn't possibly swear loyalty to the Black Emperor, Solomon, neither could Pallas Zoroast betray Emperor Solomon and turn to the true creator. What? You say it's just a nominal change and not a real betrayal. But why would Black Emperor, Solomon, believe that? Pallas was well aware of how sensitive their Black Emperor had become regarding such matters after the betrayals by Tutor and Trunsoest. The loyalty of angels is already questionable, and although Pallas had followed Solomon for many years, he dared not claim absolute loyalty. Solomon was, of course, aware of this. Especially now that the true creator seemed intent on establishing a church, threatening to share the faith with Solomon. Their relationship was at a delicate juncture, and if Pallas were to officially join the true creator's church, he might witness Zarathul's ascension by the next day. That guy had been eyeing his position for a long time. Although Pallas had already internally voiced countless complaints, he maintained a gentle smile on the surface and politely declined, "Thank you, Lord Libert. However, I've pledged my allegiance to Emperor Solomon, and I fear I cannot serve the true creator." "No worries, the true creator won't mind you serving two Sequence 0 beings at the same time," Lynn replied with a smile, seemingly oblivious to the old man's subtext. Pallas. The true creator may not mind, but Emperor Solomon certainly would. Pallas felt his breath catch. Looking at the young angel who seemed either genuinely unaware or just pretending not to notice his subtle hints, Pallas finally made his words more direct, "But I'm afraid Emperor Solomon would mind." "No worries, trust me, he won't mind either," Lynn said as he naturally nudged Medici aside, poured himself a cup of tea, and smiled as he continued, "After all, Solomon is a smart man, and smart men understand how to weigh the pros and cons. If I were asking you to completely switch to the true creator's side, Solomon might disagree, but if it's just a nominal change, trust me, he wouldn't just agree, he'd support it." Lynn's words were spot on. The Black Emperor, Solomon, certainly wouldn't want his follower, Pallas, to truly support the true creator. But if it was merely a nominal change, Solomon might not refuse at all. Compared to a Sequence 1 who wasn't wholeheartedly loyal to him, it was clearly more valuable to cooperate with Lynn, a being suspected of being a sane ancient god and closely connected to multiple Sequence 0 beings. Moreover, allowing Pallas to nominally join the true creator's church would help Solomon keep tabs on the church and gather information related to Lynn. In summary, the benefits outweighed the risks. Pallas couldn't fathom what kind of monster the young angel before him was, but he could tell that Lynn's words seemed to be true. But how? Why? Pallas's mind was racing with countless questions. There must be something he didn't know but Solomon did, something that made this young angel so certain that Solomon would agree to even support, his nominal allegiance to the true creator. While his brain was running at full speed, Pallas said, I need to consult with Emperor Solomon before I can give you an answer. Even though it seemed like the young angel was telling the truth, Pallas decided to play it safe and ask Solomon about the situation. This would also serve as a gesture of loyalty. That's perfectly fine. After all, you're an angel who follows Solomon. If you want to join the true Creator's church in name, you certainly need to consult Solomon first. Lynn smiled and nodded, seemingly unconcerned with Pallas's hesitation. He then asked with a grin, by the way, it seems like you don't get along well with Amon. Amon and I are both on the Marauder pathway, but we follow different emperors, so we do have our conflicts, Pallas replied, momentarily stunned by Lynn's sudden topic shift, but he still nodded. His rivalry with Amon wasn't exactly a secret, so there was no harm in admitting it. That's a coincidence. I don't get along well with Amon either. Lynn said, as if suddenly remembering something. He reached into the void and pulled out a small cage. Oh, right, let me show you my caged Amon. Isn't it cute? Who hungry? Save me. Pallas was stunned for a moment and then fixed his gaze on the cage. Inside, there was a miniaturized Amon lying half dead, looking extremely weak. Clearly, things hadn't been going well for him. But Pallas didn't care about Amon's condition. He was more shocked by the mere sight of the cage, feeling as if his worldview had been shattered. Who would keep Amon in a cage like this? Even if it was just an avatar, this was still absurd. Honestly, as Amon's current nemesis, Pallas had fought Amon many times, usually with more losses than wins, but he had managed to consume some of Amon's avatars. But consuming an avatar was a far cry from openly keeping one caged. At least Pallas himself could never do the latter because it was akin to keeping a ticking time bomb that Amon's true body could locate at any time. Yet the young angel before him seemed completely unconcerned, treating Amon as if he were nothing more than a hamster. As he processed this shock, Pallas also felt a chill run down his spine. He suddenly recalled the rumors surrounding Libert Abraham and remembered how Emperor Solomon's tone had subtly shifted when he mentioned Libert after attending the mysterious gathering organized by him. Pallas suddenly considered the possibility that, to this young angel, Amon was nothing more than a toy. And if even someone as fearsome as Amon was just a toy to him, then what about Pallas himself? Pallas couldn't help but swallow hard, and in that moment, his instinct for survival kicked in. At this point, Lynn's attention had already shifted away from Pallas. He was merely observing the half-dead mini-Amon in the cage with a complex expression, suddenly remembering something. Before he had fallen unconscious, he had placed the mini-Amon in his spatial equipment. While entities like Bethel might have been able to open it, they certainly wouldn't casually rummage through his belongings. This meant that Mini-Amon had likely been locked up in that space for the past 3 months. This. End of chapter. Even Lynn, at this moment, felt a small pang of conscience. He then found a stick from somewhere and poked the seemingly frail and possibly dying tiny Amon lying in the cage. He said, Are you okay? You're not really going to die, are you? You're a mythical creature, how could you starve to death after just 3 months? His tone was laced with both disdain and suspicion by the end. Tiny Amon weakly raised his eyes to look at him, his expression pitiful as he said, I won't starve to death, but I do get hungry. If you didn't eat for 3 months and were stuck in a dark, cramped space, can you really endure it? Oh right, it seems hunger is still a thing. Recalling the original novel where even after becoming an angel, the fool never gave up on 3 meals a day, Lynn nodded in agreement and continued, So, will you die? If you are, let me know so I can inform your main body and get your replacement ready. Tiny Amon immediately looked deeply hurt. He stared at Lynn in disbelief, his eyes wide open. After a long pause, he said, How can you say such icy words with your warm breath? Clearly, during his time with Lynn, Tiny Amon had learned to keep up with the times and had picked up quite a few old jokes from him. Foolish child, information beings theoretically don't need to breathe. Lynn responded with a doting smile as he reached into the golden cage and playfully flicked Tiny Amon on the forehead, sending him rolling a few times before smiling and saying, Also, don't think I didn't notice, you've been busy these 3 months and secretly weakening the cage's seal. No wonder you're starving. Ouch! Tiny Amon sat up after rolling a few times, holding his head with both hands and playing the pity card. I'm dying. I'm dying. Woe is me, not only starving for 3 months but also being hit. Apparently, compared to the more reserved Amon's main body, who maintained his image most of the time, Tiny Amon had much less shame and could cry on cue. Of course, it's possible that this fellow picked up bad habits from Lynn, considering that a certain little Mr. Bubbles is also quite shameless. Alright, stop crying like a cat. You're not a cat, a hamster should know its place. Lynn sighed in exasperation, even though he knew Tiny Amon was playing the pity card. But little Mr. Bubbles really did have a soft spot for this kind of act. Lynn then turned to Palace Zoroast and saw the latter looking over with an expression of over-imagination, which didn't surprise him. He merely asked, Mr. Palace, would you mind preparing some food for Tiny Amon? He's not picky, anything a normal person can eat will do. Of course, no problem. Palace, who had witnessed the entire interaction, glanced at Tiny Amon with a peculiar look, feeling as though his worldview had been reshaped once again. God help him, he had never seen Amon like this before. In Palace's memory, all his impressions of Amon were of cunning and treachery. Occasionally, there was some warmth, but that was usually just a prelude to a cruel prank. Amon would smile gently while completely parasitizing your soul, causing you to lose yourself entirely and become yet another Amon. Typically, anyone caught by Amon wouldn't be the only one in trouble. Their entire family, possibly even an entire clan, could all end up turning into Amon. Palace had seen this firsthand. He once encountered a noble family with a saint in its lineage, one that was a vassal of the Zoroast family. The head of the family was a sequence 4 parasite of the Marauder pathway, and perhaps because of this, he fell victim to Amon. By the time Palace arrived, he saw the entire family, hundreds of them, putting on monocles in unison right before him. Honestly, even Palace found that scene chilling. And that wasn't an isolated case. Besides the Marauder families that followed the Zoroast family, over the years, Amon had devoured countless Beyonders of the Marauder pathway. Some were from the Solomon Empire, some from the Trunsoest Empire, and even some from the noble families that followed the Tudor dynasty. Palace sometimes wondered why Amon did such things. Devouring Beyonders of the Marauder pathway might bring him some benefits, but it couldn't cause a significant qualitative change. Instead, it carried high risks. Ordinary Beyonders who swallowed too many Beyonder characteristics, even those of the same sequence, are needed to digest them again, and it was easy for them to be overwhelmed by the accumulated madness in those characteristics. Beyonder characteristics were not inherently a good thing in large quantities, otherwise, Beyonders wouldn't have children specifically to expel excess characteristics. And Amon's behavior was also overly cruel, in Palace's opinion. Though Palace himself could be a ruthless angel, never sparing his enemies, he was generally kind to those who weren't his enemies. If he encountered a junior of the Marauder pathway without any conflict of interest, Palace wouldn't mind teaching them a few tricks to help them avoid pitfalls. After all, while Beyonders of the same and adjacent pathways could be enemies, that depended on the situation. Palace was not so paranoid as to worry that low or mid-sequence Beyonders of the same pathway would grow up to become his competitors. If that were to happen, it would be a matter of fate. Which is why Palace is considered the conscience of the Marauder pathway. His mindset is the complete opposite of Amon's. So while the Amon family consists of just Amon, the Zoroast family, although later consumed by Amon for various reasons, was once a thriving clan. Because he had experienced Amon's terror firsthand, Palace found it hard to believe his eyes when faced with this shameless tiny Amon. It almost made him wonder if he was hallucinating. Perhaps his gaze was too obvious, for the young angel suddenly glanced at him, handed him a branch, and said with a smile, "Would you like to try? Teasing Amon is quite amusing." Palace looked down at the branch in his hand, then at tiny Amon in the cage, and resolutely extended the branch into the cage. How could anyone resist the temptation to tease Amon? Honestly, which high-sequence Beyonder of the 3 mystery pathways could resist this? If word got out, people would line up to pay for the chance to tease Amon. Meanwhile, in the 5th epoch, in Leonard's mind, Palace, who had been quietly resting, suddenly said, "I suddenly feel like Amon might not be that terrifying after all." His voice was old and filled with emotion. Leonard, who was currently carrying out a mission for the church in disguise, was puzzled. What? Who is Amon? End of chapter. While Leonard was racking his brain trying to figure out who Amon was, Lynn from the fourth epic was enjoying a meal with tiny Amon at the Zoroast family residence. During this time, they also discussed the extent of the Zoroast family's support for the True Creator Church. One has to admit, Amon was indeed very useful. Upon realizing this, young angel viewed the Amon before him as merely a source of amusement. Palace Zoroast immediately decided to sponsor the True Creator Church as much as possible without damaging the family's foundations. After all, money can always be earned again, but offending a stronger version of Amon just to save a little bit of money is definitely not worth it. Although the time they've known each other has been short, Palace Zoroast had clearly recognized Lynn's personality during this period. At the same time, Palace repeatedly promised Lynn that he would soon inquire with the Black Emperor Solomon about getting a title within the True Creator Church. As long as Solomon agreed, he would immediately report to the church. As I expected, it's far more enjoyable to harvest the fruits of someone else's labor than to painstakingly cultivate them yourself. In the fifth epic, Lynn stretched lazily by the window, sighing with satisfaction. Since things with Palace Zoroast in the fourth epic were settled, and there were no other major issues to handle, Lynn naturally shifted his attention to the fifth epic. After all, he still had important matters to attend to here. As he was contemplating, Lynn suddenly sensed something, and he turned to glance at the door. Shortly after, a knock sounded. Knock, knock, knock. Lynn glanced at Mr. A, who was quietly squatting like a mushroom in the corner. Understanding Lynn's intent, Mr. A walked over to open the door, revealing a masked young girl standing outside. The girl wore a black cloak with gold edges. Her long blonde hair flowed beneath the cloak, and her eyes were a vibrant green, resembling emeralds. Even though only half of her chin was visible, it was clear that her entire face must be exceptionally beautiful. However, the two people inside the room were equally stunning, so no one was overly surprised by the girl's beauty. Lynn merely glanced at Miss Justice once, his gaze subconsciously sweeping over her ears, neck, and wrists, noticing the different but equally exquisite and expensive jewelry from their last meeting. Still today, Miss Justice carries the power of money. Lynn thought to himself with a sigh as he welcomed her into the room. After guiding her to the sofa, he smiled apologetically. I apologize, I should have met with you a week ago, but I happened to get caught up in an unexpected situation and only today had the opportunity to see you. While Lynn was assessing Miss Justice, she was also observing him. Seeing the familiar young man before her, someone she had worked with multiple times and established a stable collaboration with, she smiled. It's okay. I don't mind waiting. After hesitating for a moment, Miss Justice couldn't resist asking, but I do wonder, Mr. Peaker, what kind of unexpected situation did you encounter? Of course, if it's inconvenient to tell me, please forgive my intrusion. To keep the Tarot Club's existence a secret, Miss Justice and Lynn had agreed to address each other as they would in the outside gatherings whenever there were outsiders present. The main reason Miss Justice asked was that she was genuinely curious about what kind of unexpected situation Lynn had encountered that even forced him to miss the last Tarot Club meeting. It's not that I can't tell you. The unexpected situation I got caught up in recently was mainly related to the Angel of Secrets. However, I must apologize, as I cannot divulge the specific details, Lynn replied with a smile, not surprised that Miss Justice asked, knowing her curiosity was always strong. Related to the Angel of Secrets. Right, the little son had asked the fool about the whereabouts of the Angel of Secrets at the last Tarot Club meeting. Miss Justice suddenly realized. Although she was still curious about what exactly Lynn and the Angel of Secrets had been up to, since Lynn had already stated that he couldn't disclose it, she naturally wouldn't press further. Instead, she turned her attention to the other person in the room. She was also quite familiar with this person, as it was none other than Mr. A from the Aurora Order. As a frequent attendee of Mr. A's Beyonder gatherings, Miss Justice had seen him multiple times, but she never expected to see him under such circumstances. Recalling the deal proposed by the Pope, she scrutinized Mr. A more closely, subconsciously comparing him to the famous actors and opera singers in her memory. You know, it wasn't apparent before, but after the comparison, Miss Justice realized that even among those famous actors and opera singers, Mr. A's appearance was exceptionally striking. Although Miss Justice didn't believe that someone could become a famous actor based on appearance alone, it had to be said that good looks did make it easier for actors to stand out. This realization made her breathe a sigh of relief. Although she was very willing to support Mr. Fool in reforming the criminals of the Aurora Order, helping them become better people and atone for their past sins, she was indeed worried that Mr. Pope would send her a group of Aurora Order members who were unattractive, couldn't sing, couldn't act, and were good at nothing but eating. If that were the case, no matter how extensive Miss Justice's network in the theater world was, it would be difficult to achieve Mr. Fool's goals. Now, though she still wasn't sure if Mr. A could act or sing, at least his appearance was satisfactory. And as long as the appearance was satisfactory, the rest could be learned slowly. However, I still hoped Mr. A isn't tone deaf, otherwise, things would get tricky, Miss Justice mused to herself before smiling and saying, "So, Mr. A, Mr. Peaker has already informed me of the upcoming arrangements, and I've contacted the teachers who can instruct you. I just need to know who will be learning and what your plans for the future are." Although she had lost contact with the Pope for a week, Miss Justice hadn't been idle during this time. She had fully utilized her connections to contact several famous acting teachers. Everything was ready, they just needed students to start learning. Mr. A didn't immediately respond to Miss Justice but first looked at Lynn. Seeing this, Lynn waved his hand and said, "You know your subordinates better than I do, so it's up to you to introduce their situation." End of chapter. Yes, Your Excellency. Mr. A responded respectfully, then turned his gaze towards Miss Justice. As a former bishop of the Aurora Order, Mr. A naturally recognized that Miss Justice was the noble lady who had participated in several Beyonder gatherings he hosted and had purchased the Spectator Pathway potion formula. Thinking of how he had a deal with her at that gathering, Mr. A suddenly had a realization. Perhaps his lord had already foreseen this day and had established a relationship with this noble lady in advance. As expected of my lord. Due to the influence of the true creator, Mr. A, who saw everything through rose-tinted glasses, praised his lord in his heart. Then he looked at Miss Justice with a gentle expression and said, "There are a total of 10 people, including myself, who need to undergo training. Here's the detailed list." Mr. A had clearly prepared for this and pulled out a stack of papers from his pocket, handing them over to her, who was seated opposite him. Miss Justice took the stack of papers and saw that they not only listed the names, genders, ages, and specialties of those who needed training but also had corresponding photographs attached beside each person's information. After browsing through each page, she finally let out a sigh of relief. Not only Mr. A, but the remaining 9 members of the Aurora Order who were preparing to debut also possessed impressive appearances, although they were slightly less striking than Mr. A. With so many good-looking individuals forming a troupe, it could be said that they already had a significant gimmick. A little publicity would be enough to capture the public's attention. As long as these people weren't tone-deaf or stiff in their expressions, the troupe would be a success. Miss Justice encouraged herself inwardly. After putting down the documents, she said, "Where are the others? If possible, I would like to meet them soon and arrange for their training." "They're right here," Mr. A replied without hesitation. "If you wish to meet them, I can have them come in at any time." "Then please call them in," Miss Justice responded, not particularly surprised. The place where she had met with Mr. A was clearly one of the Aurora Order's strongholds, so it wasn't surprising that the other members preparing to debut were waiting in the villa after being notified. Under normal circumstances, Miss Justice would never come to such a place, nor would she agree to meet with her tarot club companions here. However, this time, with Mr. Fool as a guarantee, she didn't mind. After receiving her clear answer, Mr. A did not hesitate. He promptly called everyone in, making the already spacious room feel somewhat crowded. But as far as the eye could see, everyone in the room could be described as a beauty, making the room's average attractiveness skyrocket. Miss Justice also perked up. She curiously observed the members of the Aurora Order lined up before her and had to admit that they were all unique in their own ways. There was Mr. A, who had a slightly gloomy demeanor, whose features were more feminine than masculine, giving him a delicate beauty. Then there was the sunny and cheerful girl with tanned skin and a bright smile, complete with little tiger teeth, and a young man whose features were as finely sculpted as a statue, with deep-set eyes and a mysterious aura as if his very presence told a story. It could be said that these people looked even better in person than in the photos she had just seen. Mr. Peaker, I now understand why you want the Aurora Order members to form a troupe. Miss Justice couldn't help but quietly exclaim. Even though she rarely saw so many attractive people in one place at once, and she had to admit it was quite a sight. This is the Aurora Order's specialty. The Foolish Beauties troupe isn't just a joke. Lynn also surveyed the diverse group of beauties from the Aurora Order, feeling that his understanding of the true creator's appreciation for beauty had been updated once again. It seems that the true creator not only loves beautiful people but has a broad aesthetic, appreciating beauties of all kinds. By the way, does this indirectly suggest that Saussure is also a fan of beauty? It seems madness does reveal one's true nature. Lynn muttered to himself, then spoke up, introduce yourselves one by one, and demonstrate your talents. Oh, and Lynn turned to Miss Justice and introduced her to the beauties of the Aurora Order. Although you already know this, I must formally introduce her again. This is Miss Audience, my friend, an ally under our Lord's command here to assist with your debut, and also your future sponsor. You must show her the same respect you show me. At these words, the Aurora Order's beauties all turned to Miss Justice. Faced with the attention of so many people, Miss Justice didn't flinch. She was long accustomed to being the center of attention at banquets, so she simply smiled and said, "Hello everyone." "Hello, Miss Audience. I'm Salim Ratti, and I'm good at dancing." The cheerful girl with tanned skin was the first to introduce herself. She even performed a small dance with a strong southern continent flavor for her on the spot. It had to be said, it was quite distinctive. At least, Miss Justice found it quite enjoyable to watch. With Salim Ratti breaking the ice, the others naturally followed suit. For a moment, the room felt like it was the episode of America's Got Talent, with the Aurora Order members each presenting their song and dance. Although some danced like they were doing a fitness routine, and others couldn't hit a single note correctly, at least in terms of attitude, everyone was very enthusiastic. It can only be said that fanatics have their advantages. In a secret organization like the Aurora Order, where most of the believers were turned into fanatics by listening to the true creator's raps, as long as the Lord gave an order, no one would question it. Even those who weren't fanatics but were opportunists wouldn't dare to question the true creator's command in such an environment. After everyone finished performing, Miss Justice had a good grasp of the abilities of these beauties before her. Most of them had potential. Although they couldn't compare to the professional actors she had seen, with some time under a good teacher, they might not be too bad. But a few of them. Miss Justice looked with concern at the couple of members among the 10 who couldn't hold a tune, had stiff dance moves, and couldn't manage a convincing facial expression even while acting. She felt a bit of a headache coming on. Should I just have them be simple eye candy? After all, it's normal for a troupe to have a few purely decorative members. Miss Justice recalled the troupe members she knew and nodded slightly. She casually said, "I already have a basic understanding of everyone's situation. Next, I'll arrange for you all to study under several renowned teachers who were once very outstanding actors but are now retired and taking on students. I hope you will study diligently with your teachers. I've also found scriptwriters and makeup artists." Miss Justice had clearly done her homework. Not only had she found teachers for the Aurora Order's beauties, but she had also lined up scriptwriters, makeup artists, prop masters, assistants, and even small workers for the troupe. End of chapter. Of course, it was impossible for Miss Justice to personally find every single person herself. Instead, after receiving a list from someone else, she carefully selected each person to ensure they were all reliable talents. It was clear that her enthusiasm for launching the Aurora Order idol group was beyond just active, it was extremely active. After Mr. A led all the members of the Aurora Order out to prepare for their upcoming studies, Lynn, who had essentially played the role of an idol overseer in this matter, turned to Miss Justice and handed her a piece of paper. "This is the reward I promised you, the formula for the Sequence 4 Manipulator Potion. Indeed, Lynn had traded the Sequence 4 manipulator potion formula with Miss Justice. After all, giving away a potion formula didn't cost him anything but was something Audrey needed, making it a win-win transaction. Thank you, Mr. Pope. Audrey's eyes lit up as she hurriedly took the manipulator potion formula. After memorizing its contents, she said with a hint of sentimentality, I wonder when I'll be able to advance to Sequence 4. I believe with your talent, it won't take long, Lynn replied with a smile. He then added, afterward, I'll still need your help with the Aurora Order's premiere. I really don't have many connections in the theater or noble circles. It's the least I can do. Audrey waved her hand, her expression turning expectant as she seemed to recall something. Actually, I'm quite looking forward to the day the Aurora Order premieres. The word, premiere, didn't exist in this world, but Audrey had learned it from Lynn, so she knew what it meant. I'm also looking forward to that day, Lynn said, his smile becoming more nuanced. Perhaps you'll see some unexpected guests in the theater, like a certain high-ranking member of the church. Hearing this, Audrey paused, her expression becoming equally nuanced, but her gaze grew even more expectant. While Lynn was discussing the Aurora Order's debut with Miss Justice, on the other side, his divine incarnation didn't immediately rush to the forsaken land of the gods to appease a certain war angel on the brink of losing his temper. Instead, he first found a secluded room to prepare a prayer ritual to the Evernight goddess. As a person with a strong sense of rituals, Lynn naturally didn't use expired essential oils or random spiritual materials to get by. He carefully prepared all the necessary materials and, once the ritual was set up, said to the flame before him. Some matters, perhaps, we need to discuss face to face, not just regarding my recent plans, but also whether you can return to the pre-epic. As Lynn's voice fell, the flame naturally rose, almost reaching the ceiling. Lynn calmly watched this scene, observing as the flame returned to normal. Suddenly, the airflow in the room became abnormal, and the distorted colors representing the spirit world spread throughout the space. In the next moment, a half-meter high door opened above the flame, and something was thrown in front of Lynn. Lynn bent down and picked it up. It was an object resembling a decoration. As a seasoned craftsman, Lynn instantly recognized it as an Beyonder item closely linked to the Evernight goddess, and its use likely involved sleeping with it hung above one's head. A dream catcher. This isn't quite the same as Klein's journey to the Evernight kingdom. Lynn muttered, then briskly tidied up the scene before returning to the bedroom. He hanged the catcher top of the bed, and lay down on a pillow. Almost the moment his head touched the pillow, Lynn felt a force pulling him into a dream. He could have resisted it, but why would he? So, a few seconds later, when Lynn opened his eyes again, he found himself standing amidst a field of flowers and grass. This was clearly the divine kingdom of the Evernight goddess, Amonises. Lynn wasn't surprised. He simply looked ahead, where a figure stood a few steps away. Although this figure had some differences from the Amonises he had met in the fourth epic, it was clearly the same person. Should I say, nice to meet you, or, long time no see, Amonises? Lynn smiled, as if leaving the choice to the other party. Long time no see, Lynn Sotos. I'm glad to see you awakened, Amonises replied with a smile. She seemed to have received the relevant memories of the 100 years Lynn spent asleep after the second epic. She gestured for Lynn to come closer and said, if you don't mind, why not have a cup of coffee first? It would be an honor. Of course, Lynn wouldn't refuse the Evernight goddess. The two soon arrived at a coffee room, where Amonises, the host, poured them both cups of black coffee. I thought it would be flower tea this time, Lynn glanced at the black coffee in the cup and said with a smile. Though I indeed prefer flower tea, I thought you'd probably enjoy black coffee more, Amonises responded with a matching smile. The two enigmatic individuals exchanged a glance, seemingly understanding each other without words. All right, since we both intend to cooperate, let's be straightforward. Lynn took a sip of the black coffee, waved his hand, and said, I came to see you this time mainly for two reasons. The first is about the modification of the true creator's image. Hearing this, the Evernight goddess didn't show any surprise. She smiled and said, you're planning to establish the true creator's church here as you did in the fourth epic. Clearly, Ammonizes was well aware of what Lynn had been up to in the fourth epic. This wasn't surprising, as the establishment of the true Creator's Church had not been kept secret. Anyone could learn about it with a bit of inquiry. However, few knew the specifics, and with the true Creator himself handling church matters in recent months, almost no one realized that the church's establishment had been largely driven by Lynn. But Ammonizes wasn't most people. As one of the old schemer who knew Lynn well, she naturally guessed that the true Creator's Church was his work. No, I have no such intention, that would be too troublesome. I'm just planning to reform the Aurora Order, to reverse the true Creator's reputation in this era. Lynn shook his head, speaking slowly, and in this regard, I hope to receive assistance from the Evernight Church. With your endorsement, this plan can proceed smoothly. Hearing this, Ammonizes glanced at Lynn and then nodded, saying, I can have the Evernight Church fully support your actions. Without Lynn, the Evernight Goddess would certainly not take the initiative to redeem the true Creator. But with Lynn choosing to stand on the true Creator's side, Ammonizes didn't mind offering her help. After all, she had no deep-seated enmity with the true Creator, and if helping him regain clarity would benefit the world, it was worth doing. End of chapter. As for the enmity between the true Creator and the Lord of Storms, Ammonizes doesn't seem to think it's a big issue. Although all three gods were involved in the betrayal of the ancient sun god, the eternal blazing sun took the lead in the rebellion and has been the most active ever since, drawing about 80–90% of the hatred. The Evernight Goddess believes that the remaining animosity can be resolved through negotiation. After all, if a fight were to happen, the Lord of Storms would certainly lose to the true Creator's faction, led by Lynn. However, if the Evernight Goddess were to become Lord of Storm's staunch ally, then he might still have a sliver of hope. After all, the Evernight Goddess has many hidden cards to play. But Ammonizes and the Lord of Storms aren't close enough to risk everything for each other. Why should she go all out for him? The Evernight Goddess muses that instead of clashing with the powerful true Creator, it might be better to persuade Leodoro. If both sides admit their past mistakes and negotiate compensation, the issue could be resolved. After all, in this world, there are no eternal enemies, only eternal interests. As long as the Lord of Storms is quick to kneel and humble himself sincerely, the other side probably wouldn't mind letting go of the past grievances. Lynn was not unaware of Ammonizes' thoughts, but he didn't care much. Smiling, he said, I thank you in advance. I'll personally visit St. Samuel's Cathedral to discuss the matter further with the Evernight Church. I'll issue a divine message to ensure they're prepared in advance, the Evernight Goddess responded with a smile. As for the second matter I came to discuss with you, it's related to the pre-epic. Lynn took a sip of his tea, looked at the Evernight Goddess, and said slowly, you should be aware of the existence of Lynn Sotos. You mean the Lynn Sotos by Klein's side? The Evernight Goddess asked curiously. I initially thought he was you, but later realized that he wasn't. He just has some connection to you. I'm curious, who is he exactly? Indeed, although Mr. Fool already knows Lynn's true identity, Klein, as a cautious friend with secrets of his own, has not reported it to the church. Klein had his reasons. He wasn't sure how the church would react if they knew Lynn's true identity. While the Evernight Goddess seemed to have a good relationship with the Angel of Secrets, Klein remained wary, following the principle of, don't doubt the authority of gods, but don't trust their benevolence. He was reluctant to test the waters with the Evernight Goddess, especially considering her history of manipulating his fate. So, as long as the church didn't ask, he would pretend to know nothing. Klein's caution didn't bother Lynn at all. Hearing Ammonizes' question, he smiled and replied, no, you're mistaken. He is also me, just my human side. Ammonizes was taken aback, clearly realizing something. Hesitantly, she asked, did you separate your humanity from your divinity? Just to better resist him. Lynn smiled faintly. So far, it's working well. Ammonizes looked at Lynn, not questioning his words, and instead asked, what do you mean by saying the pre-epic is related to your human side? Exactly what it sounds like. Lynn placed his teacup down and lowered his gaze, his tone filled with a mix of helplessness and melancholy. You know about my slumber. The reason for that slumber is because of a small accident. He almost awakened within me. Yes, Lynn was referring to his true self, almost using him as a vessel to gaze upon the world once again. It was as if he had almost awakened within Lynn's body. Lynn wasn't one to lie. Ammonize's expression grew serious. As someone who had witnessed the Rose Redemption incident and saw how the ancient sun god was forced into self-destruction by the God Almighty awakening within him, she understood the gravity of such a situation. At the same time, Ammonize suddenly understood why Lynn had fallen into a century-long slumber during the second epoch. It was to resist the awakening of the ancient god's will within him. It's important to note that while the major figures of the ancient sun god's faction were aware of Lynn's role as a human stabilizer during his slumber, Ammonize's, merely an ally, had not been privy to that secret. But it seems like you've resolved that issue now. Ammonize observed Lynn for a few seconds before asking. Temporarily, yes. Lynn nodded, then added, and thanks to this incident, my human side gained some unexpected abilities. Lynn didn't keep her in suspense and explained, that ability is called time travel. You could already guess by the name, it allows me to bring others along on travels through different eras. Ammonize was stunned. She looked at Lynn with near disbelief and couldn't help but ask, does that mean Lynn Sotos can take me back to the pre-epic? The Evernight goddess was visibly excited. As a transmigrator herself, Ammonize didn't dislike her current existence, but if given the chance, she wouldn't mind returning to the pre-epic for a visit, even if she didn't intend to stay. More importantly, if she could return to that time, perhaps she could. Yes. Lynn nodded and took another sip of tea. At that moment, Ammonize's grip on her cup tightened, but she quickly regained her composure, asking, I assume there are some limitations to this ability. There are some restrictions. Lynn didn't intend to hide anything. While exaggerating is part of business, false advertising wouldn't do in this case. Especially when dealing with the Evernight goddess, who is a crafty figure and a schemer. False promises could backfire. So Lynn explained, to conduct time travel, he needs specific time-space coordinates. But that shouldn't be a concern. Transmigrators like us, who had lived through the pre-epic, naturally carry traces of that epic. Although such information isn't enough for Lynn Sotos to directly access the coordinates, given enough time, he can slowly decipher them. Ammonize visibly relaxed after hearing this and asked, how long will it take? End of chapter. Between 3 to 4 months at the shortest, and 7 to 8 months at the longest. Lynn gave a rough estimate and looked at the Evernight goddess. I assume you have enough patience for that. I don't mind waiting, Ammonize sighed in relief. As someone who had schemed for millennia just to stab the god of combat in the back, she really didn't mind waiting another 6 months. After all, what were a few more years? But don't get too excited. Time travel, as the name suggests, is just a journey. Lynn glanced at Ammonize and, noticing her thoughts, smiled and added, as a traveler of time, you can linger in a certain period for a while and even try to change a part of the past, but you can only stay for a short time. Moreover, Lynn thought of something and added, for someone like you, even if you manage to achieve your goal in a short time, it doesn't necessarily mean you can change the past. Lynn wasn't just making things up. This conclusion was based on his current experience and instincts. Because he knew he was special, he could descend into different eras and alter both the past and history, but others might not be so fortunate. It was like the elusive butterfly effect. Even if someone other than Lynn, as a time traveler, managed to change a part of the past, it wouldn't necessarily have any significant impact on the future. Hearing this, the Evernight goddess instinctively frowned, then pressed her lips together, and for once, smiled bitterly. Even if that's the case, at least I can see them again. She wanted to see her parents, her old friends. Even though many years had passed, and Ammonize had long forgotten most of their faces, she still wanted to see them. Perhaps it was an obsession, or maybe just simple nostalgia. Don't be so pessimistic. Don't forget our deal. I will bring your parents safely to this era. Lynn glanced at the Evernight goddess, his expression unusually serious. As for time travel, consider it a bonus, or perhaps a gift for the first matter. Thank you. Ammonize whispered her thanks, then closed her eyes. When she opened them again, she had returned to her calm and composed self as the Evernight goddess. She asked, if I'm not mistaken, the people traveling to the pre-epic won't be just me and Lynn Sotos. Aside from you, there's also Klein and Russell. Lynn nodded and then added, of course, there might be some additional individuals based on the circumstances. For instance, a certain little red, Lynn thought. He felt it might be worth bringing him along to the pre-epic, letting him gain some experience. Perhaps after expanding his vocabulary, he could become even more annoying and get chased after more frequently. The Evernight goddess wasn't surprised to hear this. However, she thought of something and said, by the way, the god of steam and machinery came to see me recently. Oh. Lynn raised an eyebrow, instantly guessing what it might be about. He asked, what, did he come to ask you how to deal with me? Or was he seeking information? He did ask me about you. The Evernight goddess nodded with a reserved smile. In just a few words, she sold out the god of steam and machinery. From what I know of him, he'll likely contact you soon, to discuss cooperation. The word cooperation had a particular emphasis, clearly implying that it was a subtle plea for submission. I thought he'd be more stubborn, perhaps trying to resist by, say, attempting to assassinate me. After all, he's been a Sequence Zero for so many years. Though not surprised by the reaction, Lynn couldn't help but tease. It's normal. If it were another Sequence Zero, they might indeed try that. But Artisan. The Evernight goddess's expression turned slightly awkward. She delicately said, that's just his style. Otherwise, he wouldn't have failed to digest the Paragon potion for over 1,000 years before Russell arrived. Lynn's expression turned equally complex. Unable to resist, he asked a question he'd been curious about for a while. Did he fail to digest the Paragon potion purely because he didn't understand it, or was he being suppressed by you all? A bit of both. The Evernight goddess didn't hide much here. After all, the god of steam and machinery was already a relic of the past and might fall from his divine position at any time. We did intentionally suppress his digestion of the Paragon potion. After all, you understand the power of industrialization. While everyone benefits from the era's progress, the steam church has undoubtedly profited the most, which doesn't align with most people's interests. Besides, she sighed and continued, to be honest, Earth is no longer suitable for rapid technological development. There's no more oil left, and you know the state of the cosmos. Allowing unchecked technological advancement would bring this world to ruin. Lynn froze, realizing the severity of the situation. Given his previous battles with outer gods, he hadn't given much thought to these issues when considering technological advancement. But now, he understood the implications. If technological development in the world of the mysteries continued unchecked, and rockets or space exploration technologies were eventually developed, it would indeed provoke the outer gods. Take Russell, for example, who had launched a rocket and sent himself to the moon. He'd been stuck in his tomb for 150 years before Lynn showed up. Without Lynn, he might have stayed there much longer. The real danger was if humanity reached a point where they could send satellites and other probes into space, bringing back images of what lay beyond. That would be a disaster. Beyond the outer gods, the slumbering original creator beneath the earth was another huge threat. If humanity's technological prowess reached a point where they began exploring the planet's depths, digging up the original creator could have catastrophic consequences. Realizing this, Lynn silently patted his chest in relief. He had nearly pushed for technological advancement without considering these grave threats. It wasn't that progress couldn't happen, it just needed some limits, like locking down certain fields such as aerospace. As Lynn pondered this, the Evernight goddess continued, although we did try to limit the god of steam and machinery's progress, our own internal conflicts meant it wasn't very effective. The fact that Artisan has only developed now is probably more due to his own lack of understanding. Lynn. Well, Artisan, you've outdone yourself again. End of chapter.